Us. We hope that everyone is having a great day so far, and we are ready to kick off with our presentation. Today's webinar will be all about tips to tackle 2022 and scale your business. And I have a couple really exciting guests with me today. We have Marcus Cook and Lori McCabe. Lori, feel free to unmute and turn on your video anytime. And we've got Marcus here. Thanks so much for the wave. It is so great to have you both, and we're really excited to tackle some of these tips here. So we'll go ahead and get started as soon as we get Lori online so that we can kick this off. But for a bit of background while she's doing that, let's start off with some background on Lori. So Lori is here she is. She's the co-founder of SMB Group, which is a small business analyst agency that advises businesses and does various surveys to work with vendors and small businesses around the world to advise them on best practices. And they've done a few surveys over the past year or so that have really helped inform on what some small businesses have been going through amidst the pandemic. And beyond that, SMB Group was founded just prior to the 2008 recession, so they know quite a bit about tough times for small business, and Lori might speak to that a little bit as well. And then we also have Marcus Cook from Capital Corridor joining us. Capital Corridor, Marcus will explain a little bit more about, but they're an intercity rail system that I have personally taken many times and love. I actually got in contact with Marcus through my mom taking the train. So in addition to loving him in a professional context, we have a great personal relationship, and I am very grateful for all that he does. So let's go ahead and start things off here. We are going to talk a little bit more about Lori first. As soon as she is able to get on video, it looks like we might be having a little bit of difficulty there, but why don't we circle back and go ahead and start with Marcus with your introduction and a little bit more information about Capital Corridor.
Thanks so much, Summer. Good day, everyone. I'm Marcus Cook. I'm the Principal Marketing Representative for the Capital Corridor. And if we go to just maybe the next slide, then we can do an overview, and then we can bounce back to Lori, Summer. And so we are an intercity passenger rail service located in the Northern California mega region. So we serve, a lot of iconic destinations in the Silicon Valley, the San Francisco Bay Area, and all the way into the capital, so Sacramento and that whole valley. We have been in operation for 30 years now. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. And for us, that means a long history of success. Pre-COVID, our ridership was at 1.7 million. And we do all of this with just 20 employees. And I mean, that's everything from marketing to engineering to, even our planning team. The way that we're able to do this and run this service is because we are an Amtrak operated route. So many of you who have ridden Amtrak, throughout the country may not realize that within certain areas, there are agencies that are responsible for a particular line. So that Capital Corridor line, we are responsible for, we are the managing agency, and then we rely on Amtrak to fulfill the operational duties. And that involves things like ticketing. And that, while it works great for us, it does present some challenges for us as an organization. And that has to do a lot with data. And I think that we have all become so sensitive to, having access to data, especially living in this pandemic environment now. So for us, the challenge is that Amtrak owns our customer data. They have a lot of the, metrics that we look for to be able to measure even our success. And so that does become a bit of a challenge for us when we're starting to think about how do we shape and grow our service. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about just how we've leveraged a lot of the Zoho applications really to be able to help elevate our service, be able to reach our customers better, and to really just look forward to the future and how we evolve over time. And it looks like Lori's back with us, so I'll let her do her introduction.
Yeah, hi. Sorry about my technical difficulties. This is Lori McCabe, and I'm one of the two co-founders of SMB Group. We started SMB Group about 11 years ago with the sole purpose of focusing on how small and medium businesses use technology in their business, what their requirements are, obstacles, opportunities, etc. And over the years, we've done many, many, many surveys with SMBs to get their take on lots of different things. And what we'll be referring to a lot in this presentation is mainly data from our most recent survey, which we conducted in November of 2021, which was called Technology Directions for the Future of Work. And anyway, I'm really excited to be here and joining Marcus and Summer, and look forward to your questions.
Thanks so much for joining us, Lori. Glad we were able to work things out. And Marcus, thank you so much for that great introduction. I wanted to mention too that Capital Corridor is a Zoho One customer. And for those of you who are unaware, Zoho One is our platform of applications that we offer to cover all business needs. So it includes our applications for sales and marketing, like CRM and email campaigns, into social media management, and then into the back end of the office, covering finances, HR, and beyond. So Capital Corridor is using various pieces of that they'll be talking about throughout the presentation. And the best part about that is that all of those applications work together to provide a unified experience and interface. So you'll learn a little bit more about that as we go, but I wanted to give a brief introduction there as well. Now, Marcus, I believe we got through everything in your introduction. Was there anything else that you wanted to add here?
No, I think we covered it pretty nicely. We can see here just what our route map is and just the connectivity that we have. I mean, when you're thinking about the San Francisco 49ers, I know we have fans on the call. We just stop right at Levi's Stadium. So, we really are an integral part of the public transit network in the Northern California region.
Absolutely. And I can vouch for that. I remember since childhood taking Capital Corridor all over the place. So I'm excited to get going here. So let's jump straight in. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've been hearing from SMBs in the past year. And I know integration is huge. Lori, can you talk to us a little bit more about what you've been hearing here?
Yeah, absolutely. We really find that in almost all of our surveys for the last few years anyway, SMBs rank integration in their top 3 lists of technology challenges. And I don't think it's surprising because, when businesses start out and they're small, they buy multiple point solutions or using Excel or other spreadsheets to handle different things. And they're kind of automating things on the go a lot of times in an ad hoc, as needed way. And while this can work okay when you're really small and when the business is not very complicated, as you grow, especially, you start realizing that there's a lot getting lost in translation between these different applications and different places you have data. Things are not flowing from one place to another. And, like from sales, you close a sale, let's say, into your accounting system. So basically, at the end of the day, you have to kind of manually piece together information and processes, and a lot can get lost and fall between the cracks. And it definitely creates a drag on the business as time goes by, and it can really prevent you from scaling and growing the business. You're adding more people, more products, hopefully more customers, you're selling more, but it's harder to manage all this and get a holistic view and understand, what do we need to do here? What happens, when I do X over here? What happens with Y? You can't really see how one thing's affecting each other, what levers you can pull to maybe improve things and how they're going to affect different areas of the business. And most importantly, it's just really hard to get everybody on the same page with the same understanding of what's happening in the business in real time.
Absolutely. I think that's so crucial. And, building off of some of those integration challenges, Marcus, I know Capital Corridor struggled with some of those issues. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey with Zoho One and kind of what that integration has meant for the business and what things used to be like?
Absolutely. I mean, we're in a completely different place now than we were when I came to the organization about 5 years ago. Today, as you mentioned, we are a Zoho One user. We've been using Zoho One for about 2 years now. And what that's allowed us to do is to really just become a lot more efficient we've been able to scale some of our processes while keeping our same, staffing, because that's the one challenge is that you can't just add more staff. That's not always going to be an option for most organizations. And, right now we're using 8 native Zoho applications, but we were also using 7 custom applications that we've been able to develop in Zoho Creator. So again, we've been able to just kind of keep dreaming and customize our whole experience. Like I mentioned, when I came to the organization in 2016, we had some technology solutions, but I'll tell you, they were very much a kind of single use. There was no integration happening. A lot of the applications you had to use on your desktop. You couldn't just use anything mobile. So, it really was restrictive in a lot of ways too. So, we really had to think about how we start to just kind of shape our technology to fit our business needs. And so for me, one of the programs that I was responsible for managing early on was our group travel program. And if you can imagine, we had hundreds of school groups traveling on our train every year, and all this was being managed on Excel documents. I
Mm.
kid you not. And, right away, you can see the challenge there. If you're doing any data manipulation, you delete something, okay, well, now you've just lost a whole group's reservation. And it was a very fragile process. And so, you know what? I thought, let's go ahead and find a solution that made sense for us. Now, I knew a CRM was an obvious choice. We didn't have one at the time. And of course, the idea was, as soon as you start talking about this, well, let's go with this one brand that everybody knows, and you just assume that's the pathway that you should go. But I would always caution an organization that's going to be researching new technology for their organization to think about what fits their size. Just because, there's something that you've heard of out there doesn't mean that it's going to be the best solution for you. You've also got to look at your budget, of course, because if you're going to have to pay someone to do a ton of development work for you every time you want to change a field, you're going to run out of that budget pretty quickly.
Mm.
And then the other thing is just to really think about the problems that you're trying to solve. And if you keep those 3 things in mind, I think you'll come out with a good solution for yourself. That's exactly what I did, when I was looking at a CRM solution, and that led me to Zoho. And we launched Zoho CRM back in 2016. It was, for this specific program, but what we saw was that we immediately had some automation, which we never had before. We had reports going, we had communications going in different business workflows, and no one was having to do anything to make that happen, which was the amazing thing. And so once you start thinking about what that means for an organization with limited resources, well, now you've got something to, gain some buy-in from others, and that's really how we got started. And, since then we've been able to roll in some other Zoho applications, and all that has really happened because people have seen proof of concept. They've now been able to see what we're able to accomplish. And then that's where you start to kind of layer on those other solutions and get that full integration. When we looked at other solutions, we didn't just say, oh, we'll go to Zoho. But because we already had something that worked for us, it was a consideration. And so when we added the next application, it happened to be Zoho Desk. And we've continued to build on from that mindset. And because Zoho is a platform that is an open platform, you work so well with others. I have to say, Summer, the idea is whenever we're sourcing new technology, the consideration is, does it fit with Zoho? How's that going to get us to the next, level of success or the next level of productivity?
Absolutely. It's good to hear because it's something that we really care a lot about. We want to make work easy for our customers. So I'm always glad to hear that. No, it's great to hear about some of the things that you all have been able to do, but I'd love to circle back. Let's talk about some of the other things that have really been challenges for small businesses in the past year and some of the things that have been critical to help them survive. Now, Lori, I know you've done a few surveys in the past year walking through some of this. Would you mind walking us through some of those findings?
No, of course. We really, like I said, we've been doing surveys for a long time now, with small and medium businesses, and what we're really finding is that technology is giving SMBs the ability to adapt and shift gears more quickly. We've all been through a tremendous amount of change in the last couple of years. I don't see any of that going away anytime soon. And what we're seeing that, if you can change your business strategy, you're going to, be more successful, meet your revenue expectations, exceed them. In our last study, we found that businesses that were able to adapt their strategies quickly were 20% more likely to be forecasting revenue increases and for the next year than those that didn't make changes. And being able to put technology to work, already kind of having, digital transformation is kind of a fancy word, but it's really what Marcus is talking about, right? It's taking a look and seeing, does the technology I use today support my business, or is it really kind of getting in the way and creating issues for me when I need to do something differently? So those companies that had kind of already taken steps to reshape what they were doing on the technology end so that it could better support the business were much more likely, to be enjoying revenue upticks, even in the midst of the pandemic. An uptick in revenues from 2019 to 2020. And so I think, the bottom line of this slide is, just asking yourself, do I have what I need? If I wanted to add a new channel, if I wanted to add a new, way to engage customers, if I wanted to kind of streamline expense reporting or some other back end kind of thing that I'm doing, do I have what I need to do that easily? Or is it going to be a major hassle? So I'm not going to do it. And I think that's really what, we're learning more and more. Technology is just very intertwined with business results.
Absolutely. I think that's so important to know. And we know too that the COVID pandemic has obviously had a massive impact on small and medium businesses, but what does that look like from your end?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's a mixed bag. I mean, some companies were, they immediately kind of, or not, maybe not immediately, but they ended up accelerating technology investments and adoption. And I think for those very reasons, they needed to add maybe they were doing a lot of physical kinds of world services. Well, they needed to suddenly do those services online, or they needed to add, contactless payment options, or even not everything you might even think involves technology does sometimes. Restaurant owner in Manhattan, they went to outdoor dining, and you would think, well, what does that have to do with technology? We'll just throw some tables and chairs outside. But what they found was that they had 2 areas outside now for dining, in front and back of the restaurant. Plus, when possible, they had the inside open. Well, customers wanted to reserve certain locations. It became overwhelming for them to do this manually. So they had to, develop a technology solution to be able to take and book the reservations and make sure they were keeping all this stuff straight. So the majority did accelerate, but some actually, probably because budgets were tight and they didn't have the people to do it. They had to, put the brakes on, and then in about a third, there was really no impact at all. But like I said, the ones that could go forward with this have definitely fared better.
Absolutely. And I know there's a little bit of a difference in terms of business size as well. But let's talk a little bit about strategy and what that's looked like here.
Yeah, well, what I think is really interesting here, first of all, you're absolutely right, Summer. The companies that are bigger were more able to shift gears in general. And, it makes sense. They have more people, more expertise, more budget usually, more time, because they have more people to think about things strategically. I think a lot of times the smaller the company, the more often we're working heads down in the business, right? Trying to, take care of everything, purchase orders and invoicing and whatever, and less time thinking strategically about the business. So we definitely saw this play out, that the larger companies were able to make these shifts more often than the smaller ones. And so I think the kind of the takeaway here is that if you are smaller and you've kind of maybe been putting this off, it's very important to kind of carve out some time to say, what am I doing now that's not working? What am I doing, or what am I not doing that could give me an opportunity, open up an opportunity for me? Because if you don't take that time to do that about your business and then figure out, how do I support that with technology, you're probably going to get further and further behind the curve on keeping up with whatever market expectations, employee expectations, operational efficiencies, all of those things. And you really don't want to do that.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so important to keep in mind. And Marcus, I know Capital Corridor has had to adjust quite a bit during the pandemic as well, especially with a smaller staff count. That must have been a challenge. Would you mind telling us about what that's looked like?
Sure. Working in the service industry, we were hit immediate and pretty hard by the pandemic. And, it really forced us to have to think about our business in a different way. We continue to operate, of course, as an essential service. And so essential workers were able to use us as they normally would, but we did have to reduce our schedule quite a bit, and really start to think about the health and safety precautions. The other thing, and you probably saw this with a lot of larger companies, like Lori mentioned, you're able to make these pivots really quickly. That you start getting all these emails and, these communications about, staying connected. And as I mentioned, Amtrak owns our customer data. So we didn't have that ability to just say, you know what, we're going to just stay connected to all of our customers and just do proactive communication to them. Over the years, we've been able to build up an email marketing list, and to be able to get people to sign up for our service alerts and, things like that. But we really don't have access to be able to reach out and touch all of our riders whenever we want to. And so we started thinking about that, just as a team, because, first it was a few months into the pandemic where, okay, well, people will be back. Well, now we are here, 2 years later, and we're still recovering from, our ridership. We're about, just over 30% of what we had prior to COVID. And so how could we stay connected? That was the main thing, because we want people to know that we're still here, that when they're ready to return, that we are available to serve them. And what we started thinking about was just loyalty and what that would look like. And we decided to just figure out how we could create a loyalty program that was open to all of our riders and anyone else who wanted to be part of the Capital Corridor community. And so, we started thinking about, how we could do some discounts to local businesses who are along our route. We got that set up. And then we went ahead and launched our Capital Corridor, or CC Rewards program, in January of 2021. We started out with a community of zero, really, but we did a lot of marketing. We used our social media channels just to be able to reach people wherever we could. And, the other thing is, once we started to see things change a little bit, with the health and safety conditions, by the middle of last year, we were able to start proactively doing some advertising to encourage people to get back on the train. And we also decided to release an exclusive offer just for these reward members. So we had a 50% off weekend deal, which is something that, we hadn't done anything like this before for a single rider, anyone who wanted to ride the train wherever they wanted to go. That campaign went really well. We went again from zero to now 1,100 members in our community. And so that, again, that's a whole population that we weren't tapping into before, or we were only sending out just service related messages, whereas now we can start to reward them and engage and encourage them to ride the train. The pandemic also did something that was different for us as well, because we had to think about just our products that we were offering. I remember reading an article pretty early on in the pandemic as things were shifting, and really commenting on how you might have to just adapt your business, much in the way that Lori talked about, where the restaurant started looking at, okay, we can get people who are sitting outside, sitting out in the back, and who want to be indoors, or they want to be able to choose. So we really had to think about, are our products really meeting the current market demands? And when we started looking at just our different fare offers, one that we needed to kind of evaluate was our 10 ride ticket. Prior to COVID, that ticket expired in 45 days. Obviously, people weren't riding as frequently. And so we thought, okay, you know what? This is a good starting point. Let's at least extend that out to 60 days. And that would allow people to complete those trips as they needed to, and just give them a little bit more time. The feedback has been really, really good and appreciative of that. And I also want to share one other just kind of internal thing that we did, which was, really because of the pandemic and because of what we had set up. And, prior to, COVID coming into our world, we were very much an in-office organization. We did a lot of wet signatures on our documents. So, there wasn't a whole lot of digitization of these kinds of records. Well, once we're all thrown in this remote environment, the business still has to move, right? Well, because we had Zoho One, I was quickly able to throw on, get Zoho Sign up and running within a day. And then we were able to continue with that flow of business. So being nimble is
Mhm.
kind of the other piece to all of this as well. You have to really think about what are those business needs. And because we had that foundation of Zoho already with the CRM, with Zoho Desk, Creator, and Analytics, it was so easy to be able to get Zoho Sign launched and have that immediate buy-in, which was amazing.
Absolutely. And that's great to hear. I think that is such a critical part of that. And I think you're hitting on a really big piece here, which is, helping a smaller staff go farther with the help of technology and automation. And I think this is something that we're seeing across the board. Lori, what have you been seeing in the market with regards to automation for SMBs?
Well, I think that basically, and this all kind of fits together. You can just do so much more quickly and more often when you automate. Marcus was talking about wet signatures versus e-signatures. Something very simple that almost any SMB can implement and do very quickly. Get digital signatures. And these are the kinds of things that as you automate different functions in the business, that allows the people doing those functions, that frees them up to do other things. That's where you get that time to think about and plan for, how do we grow? How do we scale, right? So, we are seeing that SMBs, small and medium businesses, are using technology more and more to automate different parts of their businesses. Sometimes it's replacing, an entire function. We don't need anybody to do this function anymore because we can just automate the whole way through. Other times, I think often easier to think about when you start out is automating specific job tasks. We found that the highest priority to automate is marketing, kind of what Marcus has been talking about. But when you think about it, if you only have maybe, I don't know, 20 or 50 customers, maybe you can do all the nurturing you need for a marketing campaign one-on-one. You can reach out to them, tailor every email to them, make sure you're keeping up with them on social media, send them, happy birthdays and 10% off coupons and all that good thing. But can you really do that for 500 employees? I mean, 500 customers, let alone 5,000 customers. So, just as Marcus was saying, being able to automate those kinds of things is really key to scaling and growth. It's just as true on the back end. If you have employees manually having to go through everything with accounts payable, accounts receivable, um, contracts, all these kinds of things, if all of that is manual, you're really going to have a hard time supporting any kind of growth in the business. And then finally, I think that, the silver lining to digitizing all this is that all of a sudden you've got the data, you've got the information, you've got it in real time. And everyone in the company can be looking at the same data, at accurate data, at up-to-date data. And so as you make decisions, it's kind of like a virtuous cycle of good. All this, it gets fed back in and it's better information. So I think that, at the end of the day, it's really not a question of if you should try to automate parts of your business that are just, creating a drag and preventing you from growth. it's just prioritizing. Where do I start? What should I do first, and getting going?
Absolutely. And I think this hits on a big piece of advice for SMBs in the next year to really focus on automation. Now, Lori, Marcus, I'd love to hear a bit more on some advice from both of you on different ways that SMBs can really implement these tactics live.
Marcus, go ahead, take the lead. I was just yakking.
Yeah, no, I think that, part of this goes back to what are you trying to solve? Because if you aren't trying to solve anything, it's easy to come up with lots of cool things that you can do. But really start to think about how your business is set up and what your next milestone is. For us, it was really about figuring out how we could become more productive with the few resources that we have. And so for that meant being able to lay that foundation for all of your applications that you're using, the technology that you're using, and then being able to add on. Now, I will say, what I appreciate about Zoho is I'm not my background isn't in technology. My background is in marketing and communications. But what I love about Zoho is that it is the type of platform where you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be a coder to be able to use it. I had experience using other CRMs and other support systems in the past, so I at least had that frame of reference. But I just had some curiosity, some YouTube videos, and a lot of chat boards to be able to figure out how I could leverage this technology to help my business run better. And that's what it was all about for us. And, if you are looking at being able to get some technology that's out there, make sure that you have the tools available to you. Now, when we did get to a point where we wanted to automate things more, and I'll go back to that group travel program just for a moment. We had a lot of teachers that were making these group travel reservations. They would travel with us once a year. It was a popular program. We obviously had to just put it on pause for now due to COVID, but they weren't traveling frequently, so they didn't remember the train numbers and how the whole system worked. Well, we decided to create a application in Zoho Creator just for the group travel program. This allowed teachers to be able to look back at their trip history. They could just simply hit copy and paste and say, I want to do that same trip all over again. And then it just kind of freed up some time because then we had, communication flows going back between our system and Amtrak. I didn't have to do anything. I can kind of just peek in, make sure everything was running smoothly. But instead of spending, during peak season, 10 to 20 hours a week going back and forth with teachers, organizing everything, the system was running itself. I spent maybe an hour during that week just doing some QA. And so when you're thinking about, how you can automate, start small because then you can easily build up on what you've developed.
Yeah, I would echo that. Think about where you can get that easy hit, that easy win, and start with that. I'd also say that you want to be able to implement things in a way that makes sense for your organization, right? So in Marcus's case, I know from talking to him before, he was able to do some of this himself, and some of it he actually, contracted with a Zoho developer. So I think it's important to kind of know how much appetite do you have for do it yourself, and when does it make sense for you to, and you may always want to contract with a third party for any kind of new custom development. But I think you should take the time to at least learn how to tweak some of the easy things, changing a field or something like that yourself. One thing that I've learned in talking to several customers who, as they evaluate different solutions, thinking about when and where you're going to need help is really important to do up front, because you want to understand what resources are out there and what are the costs of those resources. Because depending on the different solutions you choose, that expertise may be more or less pricey. So I think that what I've heard in general, that it's the price of professional development help with Zoho is sometimes more affordable than some other solutions. But it's certainly something you want to take into consideration when you're thinking out your strategy of what you need to do.
Absolutely. I think that's such a key piece is to really keep in mind the scope of work and not get yourself in over your head, especially when you don't have that many heads to help manage things.
Yeah.
But Marcus, I know Capital Corridor has been able to do some really significant automation as well. Can you walk us through some of that?
Absolutely. So, when we think about our customer experience, I think for all of us, we have just experienced the importance and the value of maintaining a great, strong relationship with your customer base. And it's become more challenging. There's been more businesses popping up overnight. And so, staying competitive partly is by making sure that your customers feel supported whenever they reach out to you. And, again, back in 2017, we started off with Zoho Desk. Prior to this, we did have a help support system that was obsolete. It wasn't very nimble, and we needed something that would allow us to be able to continue to grow because our ridership continued to grow. So we needed more services for them, and that meant developing a help center and a knowledge base where customers could come to our website. They can get the self-service that they needed to really be able to understand our policies, our refunds, things like that to help them, have a successful trip or any queries that they might have. Now, when we think about the different channels that we have activated, we of course have, our website for people to submit tickets. We have our phone channel, which is very active, social media, and of course, people sometimes email us. One, we wanted a place to be able to capture all of this information, and that's what Zoho Desk does for us. So we get a nice overview of what's happening in our customer, service realm of the business. But I do want to hone in specifically on that phone channel. It is very active for us. On average, we get, 3,100 calls a month. And I'll just go back, there's about 20 of us for our organization. And so that's a lot of, responsibility for our teams to be able to support all those callers. Well, we decided to start looking at some technology as a solution to be able to, again, help us, reach our customers or for them to be, supported when they reach out to us. And we launched an interactive voice response system in 2019. And the idea was we wanted people to be able to call in whenever they wanted. We would get calls nights, weekends, and for them to be able to get that information right when they ask for it. I think the expectation is now that when people reach out, they want a response right away. They don't want a tweet to come back to them in a day or two. They want to hear back right away. Now we were able to get this, IVR system up. It took us about, 3 months of development work. But one of the key pieces to this was really Zoho Desk. All of the information, all of our policies are written in Zoho Desk, and this system is actually reading this out. So if someone calls in and says, you know what, I want to know what your pet policy is, Zoho Desk will offer an article based on key phrases from the customer. And then the system will even ask, do you want this sent to you via text? And the system will send a text to the customer. So we really are trying to think about all the thoughtful ways that we can provide our customers with information. Another area that we think about is our schedule. It's paramount to any transportation agency. And for me, I think about sustainability. During the pandemic, that first year, we changed our schedule about 8 times. Normally, that would have meant going out, changing signs at our stations, at our bus stops, all around Northern California. But because I'd already started a project where we were using QR code technology to keep our schedules absolutely up to date all the time, we didn't have to worry about that. So if you're thinking about how your business can kind of stay, ahead of the game, use those kinds of digital resources. I mean, this is low code technology or no code technology, really, to be able to keep your business up and running and current, because you never know when that, tide's going to change or you're going to have to, kind of regroup. And this allowed us to make those changes seamlessly all throughout. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was just data transparency. I talked about how, Amtrak gives us this data, but, we were getting these Excel spreadsheets daily, monthly, weekly sometimes. And the idea is if you wanted to try to build any type of report or do any type of analysis, it was for single use, because you were just copying and pasting all these values. Well, I wanted to build out a data warehouse. I knew we needed something. I started with Zoho Creator, and that's our more or less our dumping ground. That's where we put all of that rich data that we get from all our various sources. But then once we got Zoho Analytics, this really became key because then we could tie in qualitative data. So even pulling in information from our social media channels. And now we're able to look at this robust view of what's happening with our organization. And this is actually how we start to think about how we could serve our passengers who were returning to us, maybe a little slowly because they did have some health and safety concerns being on board the train. We, launched a basically a widget on our website so people could check to see what our occupancy was on our trains. And so you could see, is this train really full? For a lot of our passengers, their last memory of riding was going to a 49ers game, and there were like 400 people, in some instances standing room only. Us coming fresh out of the pandemic, we're not necessarily looking to get thrown back into that right away. And maybe you just kind of want to see, what does that train look like, so that way I could plan a little bit better. We put all that information top level so our customers can do that, kind of information themselves. They can, do those queries. And I think that's part of it, is that when you are a small team, we often think, oh, it's best to just kind of keep that information close to our chest. But really, the reality is, the more information that we put out to our customers, the more empowered they are to make decisions that work for them. And that builds trust. That loyalty keeps them coming back. And that's what we've really focused on, is how we can keep our customers, coming back to us to feel safe, to feel secure, and to feel informed more than anything else.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's something that Zoho is really passionate about too, is, giving our customers as much information and power to take care of things as possible. That's even part of why we like doing these webinars. Working with customers at Zoho, I hear time and time again how helpful it is to hear how other customers have implemented things and different things that you've done. So just you being here, I think, does so much to share your story and empower other customers to try things like that. So we appreciate you sharing all of that. And it's really interesting to hear some of the things that you've been able to do amidst the pandemic and to help scale that staff a little bit more. Now, I know there are obviously way more challenges than we would ever have time to cover in this presentation, but Lori, why don't you walk us through some of the other top tech challenges you've been hearing
Yeah,
about?
I mean, we've talked about integration, and we've talked about a number of these things, I think, but we always find that concerns about security comes up as a top issue. I mean, we just recently, in the study we last did, even small companies are suffering from security breaches. And I was talking to a security vendor the other day who was saying a lot of companies, smaller companies, they don't even know when their system's been breached, right? So you're right to be concerned about security. And, it's very important to kind of obviously have a security plan in place and make sure that the solutions you use adhere to some basic security standards at a minimum. One of the other big challenges we see, and this happens more frequently as businesses get smaller, it's just hard to figure out what's going to work, right? Like, maybe I've decided these are the three things I really need to do in my business. Create a better way to nurture customers and grow the business. But where do I start? How do I figure out what solution will work best? And, there's so many vendors out there with so many solutions, all pitching, hey, we can do this for you. And, doing this will be easier and better and cheaper and faster and all these things. So although it is kind of hard, you have to kind of weed through and really see which vendors are just not talking the talk for smaller companies, but walking the walk. So not only do companies have to have solutions out there that have the right kind of functionality you need, but the right kind of service and support that's going to help you implement and use these different solutions, and the partner network, as I said before, because a lot of times you don't want to do things yourself. We talked about integration, and then we've just got what I call a lot of lack of problems. You don't have enough staff. You don't have enough skill. You don't have enough expertise. You have a limited budget. So those kinds of things can often hold people back too. Again, especially with the lack of staff and skills, you need to know when for your business, maybe this investment to get, $10,000 to get some custom development, that is going to pay off for you sometimes, tenfold. So when do you need to go outside to make up for some of those shortages? Really important, if the top level decision makers haven't set goals or haven't made a priority, you're never going to get either business or technology change done. So I think it's really important, if you are kind of pushing for this, to be able to document to those decision makers, this is the kind of cost savings we can get. This is the kind of growth we can get. This is the kind of ways we can get more time back for employees to do other things. You've got to have a clear ROI case a lot of times so that the decision makers will buy in. And then just within the company, okay, we've always been doing this way. It may be a lot of duct tape, it may be a lot of Band-Aids, but we know this really ugly, wart-filled way of doing things. We don't want to change. We're set in our ways. People don't like to change. I think one of the biggest mistakes we see companies make is they go forward with a couple of people to figure out, well, this is what we need to do. And they never get input in the early going from people that need to use the solution. So what I say there is just get input early and often from everyone. Have as many people as possible kick the tires. Make sure you're choosing something that people are going to buy into.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned security briefly. I think that's a huge piece here as well. What trends are you seeing there?
Well, we're seeing both in our surveys as well as, like I said, we work with a couple of security providers that, you only have to read the news. Now, we hear about all these big companies getting attacked. We don't, but actually we're hearing more and more about school systems and local governments getting attacked too. So the more, the unfortunate downside of digitizing your business is the more you digitize, the more assets you have that are vulnerable to attack. So again, it's just being aware that this is something you've got to take care of, both in the applications you use as well as in any infrastructure you have, and getting the security you need to protect your network, protect your endpoint devices. All of those things are very important and only getting more important, sadly.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear a bit more about, security is so critical. How do you think SMBs can start to tackle these challenges?
Well, again, first of all, as you go select solutions, put the vendors through their paces. Ask them what they're doing to build security and privacy safeguards into their software, right? And no application vendor, whether it's Zoho or Salesforce or Intuit, no one out there with an application is going to be able to protect everything in your company. You have, networks, you have different end user devices, you have different kinds of portals that you're opening up to customers and partners and things like that. So, you really kind of need to take a look and see where vulnerabilities could happen in your business and just try to close off as many of those as you can, with security solutions and applications that have, kind of proven their mettle in putting these protections in place for you. And I think a lot of times, in addition to those secure applications, we find more and more SMBs are using an MSP or a managed security service provider, because again, this is really complicated and you want to have that covered. So those guys, they're expert in it.
Absolutely. And I think that is so critical is, it's something that vendors can take off the hands of customers. And it's something that Zoho cares quite a bit about is not only security, but data privacy. We firmly believe that our customers' data is yours. Should you choose to take it and run away, we will be very sad to lose you, but it's no problem. Your data is yours. And we're all about giving our customers that power, the same way that Capital Corridor is. So absolutely agreed, Lori. This is something that vendors should take care of so that SMBs don't have to worry about anything else because they've got enough on their plate already. But I'd love to look forward a little bit. Marcus, what's coming up for Capital Corridor in the next year or so?
Yeah, Summer, just one comment I want to make is,
Yeah.
touching on the security aspect is that we've been using Zoho now for, about 5 years, and I've never questioned the security. We've never had an issue. So as Lori just talked about, the considerations when you're looking for the right vendor or technology solution, I can say that Zoho's a trusted one. And, some of the questions that have come through, it's just around, kind of thinking about how do you know which Zoho application to use? How do you get started? What if you don't have those technology skills that, to really support all of this? And I want to tell you again, I have a marketing background. I make pretty pictures. But if you're someone with a little bit of curiosity, and a little bit of time, which we don't have a lot of, there are so many tools that Zoho provides for you to be able to, really take your business to the next level. And that's what we've been doing over the past few years. And that's why we are going to be able to achieve some of these areas that I'm going to touch on right now. From an operational standpoint, we're always looking at ways to be able to be more efficient, safer, improve our quality, but also to reduce our cost. So we are working with the developer right now to create an application for observations for our system. And that means looking at, everything from our stations to our trains to make sure that the highest level of quality remains on our service. And, provided we're hitting all those targets, we should see a decrease in some of our overhead expenses. The other thing that we look at is just, being able to expand our service to be able to watch and monitor the safety of our service. And, let's face it, if something looks visually appealing, you're going to get more interest. And I think it was about a year or two ago, using analytics, Zoho rolled out this mapping feature. So you're able to actually take, that physical data that you have, load it into analytics and create some maps that really just tell you, from a heat map, where are your, kind of hot spots along your route where you need to be concerned. Think about it as your customers. Who are those customers that you have that may be customers of concern? How do you serve them better? We're also using this information to be able to display what are our possibilities for the physical expansion of our service. Are there new areas that we can, go into? Should we be doing some rerouting? What does that look like? What are some of the environmental impacts? So we're able to tell a much richer story of data just by using this system. And then, of course, as we are looking at something that is a little, bigger for our customer experience, it has to do with an integrated ticketing system that the state is, researching right now. They really want us to move forward with it because the idea is we want to make public transit a seamless process for anyone who chooses to use it, especially in the state of California. And what that looks like is that you can use one fare instrument, you can hop on a train, a ferry, a bus, and you're not having to worry about, oh, I need to use this card for this account for that. No, we want it to be a very seamless, experience for all of our customers. But we are going to need the technology to be able to manage this. The payment backend is one piece. We don't have to worry about that so much. But what we do have to worry about is when we start receiving all this data. Now we need a place to plug this into, help us tell our story, monitor it. We're going to be doing things like, revenue management, which we haven't done before. But I know we'll be able to do it based on our past experience with Zoho. And I know that they have the tools to help us get there in a very successful way.
Absolutely. And that's great to hear. And I think it's really exciting, some of the things that you all have been able to do. But I'd love to just circle back and let's give some people some advice moving forward. So let's talk about some key takeaways for success in 2022. Lori, Marcus, what do you think is really critical for SMBs to keep in mind moving forward?
Well, I won't read the bullets, but obviously things are going to keep changing and your business has to be ready to adapt to those changes. And all of us are at different stages with our business and have different appetites for technology and for change, quite honestly. But I think, no matter where you are, even if let's say you're still using wet signatures, like Marcus said, that is such an easy thing to just start and automate. Or if you're still trying to keep up with, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and other social networks one off, something like Zoho Social, it's very easy to just kind of get on that platform and take a lot of time out of keeping up with your social networks. Others, they're more advanced, like Marcus was saying, where they're actually customizing workflows and thinking about how, different things are going to work together and bringing in other third-party apps that they're going to integrate. I think, the bottom line is that some things are easy, right? But some things aren't, necessarily going to be easy, but there's a huge payoff, as Marcus was saying, at the end of the day. So, look at your immediate needs, but also look ahead. Try to start with what you can get your arms around and your head around, and then add in an incremental but integrated way so that at the end of the day, things fit together, they work together easily, and you've got this good real-time view of your business so you can make better decisions.
And just to add on to that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there are so many tools, resources out there that you don't have to necessarily start at, spot one and then go to two. I have relied on Zoho user groups, videos. I've talked with some of the Zoho experts. I've always been able to email someone, get a response. The message boards are out there. And so, the idea is, if you know that you have a problem, if you know that you're at a point where, if we don't get another, person in here to do this role, we're going to have to do X, Y. Well, the idea is the technology, the automation is there for you. So you don't always have to lean on hiring another person. And once you feel like you're at that threshold where, we need another resource, it's time to automate. That's where you have to look at, just your overall business operations. And while you may love being that person that gets to prepare this report, you know what? There's a system that can do it for you. And that way you can be innovating, on the next area. And so I think that, when you're thinking about how you just continue to move forward, think about ways that you can just do more with less using tools and systems that are already in place. I'll tell you really quickly, when I was setting up this marketing dashboard using Zoho Analytics, I wanted to pull in all of these social statistics and everything. And the thing that I love about social media is it's always evolving. Thing I hate about social media that it's always evolving, so you're always looking at these different metrics to figure out, how am I doing? Well, instead of me just going and building every, kind of report that I could to build this marketing dashboard, I went searching on Zoho. They had all these other dashboards that other Zoho users created. And so I just literally copied that in. It populated with our organizational data. So when you're thinking about, ways to be able to not cut corners, but be able to reproduce, and doing so in a smart, effective, and efficient way, that's how you do it. You just borrow from what's out there, build upon it, innovate, and pay it forward. I share a lot about what we've done in our organization with, other industries, and, it comes back to you. So I definitely think, you tap into the network that's available to you, and you will definitely get that back to you.
Absolutely. I love that advice. And I think that's a great point to wrap things up with. I think we've covered some really great advice here. And thank you so much, Marcus and Lori, for all of your time going through all of this. I think it's always helpful to share our stories. So hopefully people found it helpful and informational. And we do have a couple minutes left for some Q&A. I do have some questions that came up throughout the presentation that we'll kick things off with. First off is directed at Marcus, but I think, Lori, you might have some things to say about this as well, which is, what is the depth of automation needed?
Yeah, I think really quickly, the depth of automation that you needed is, like I said, when you're at a point where you're thinking that, what, I got to hire someone else, I've got to spend more money to be able to keep my business going. It's time to rescale, reshape what you're doing, because like Lori was saying, what, when you're sending out, maybe a handwritten note as part of your business to 50, 60 customers, that's one thing. But once you reach 500 or 1,000, 5,000, well, you know what, you're not going to be able to necessarily put that personal stamp on there. But you know what you can do is you can set up a drip campaign. So that way, I've got my initial welcome to the business, thank you so much for buying with us. And then, that system's going to follow up with them. So that personal touch, although it's become digital, it's become a lot more effective. So that's just one instance how you can just do a lot more through automation while not having to hire more people, spend a lot more money.
Yeah, and I would just say the depth, it depends on your needs. And where, a lot of times we find exactly what Marcus, you just reach a point where the volume of whatever you're doing, whether that's trying to, communicate with customers, or the number of invoices, or, whatever it is, you're processing or you need to process so many of these, it's time to automate. And obviously, the more you can automate and the more labor you can take out of that process, the faster and more efficient and more accurate things are going to be.
Absolutely. I think that's so critical to keep in mind. And then we also had a question asking a little bit more about your loyalty program, Marcus, and how you integrated that or how you made that work with Zoho CRM. Would you mind talking a little bit more about that?
Sure, that was, again, it was a really great, easy process. What we needed was a place for people to be able to register, obviously. Within Zoho CRM, you're able to set up web forms that integrate with your website so seamlessly. And there's all these triggers that you can set up for communication. And so because we had the framework so people could easily see, the overall program, the benefits, all they had to do was just give us their name, email address, birthday, that type of just basic information, then they're part of the community right away. And then they, by opting into that community, they're in Zoho CRM. So now we get to see their overall relationship within Zoho. So even if they've called us to, complain about their experience, or, actually say they had a great experience, we see all that information and all that's now living together. And, with Zoho CRM, you get to see that full depth of that relationship. And now we're able to do filters, queries to see just where that person is as far as their relationship with Capital Corridor. And, what I foresee in the future is us being able to continue to give back, people being able to continue to get more from us through that relationship. And that's what it's really all been about for us.
Absolutely. That's so great to hear. And I think it's really interesting how you've been able to make that that work so well in there. So that's perfect. That's great to hear. Now we have a couple kind of generic questions here that I will share. So one is, what is the best Zoho app for a service company? And we do services on the equipment we sell. David, this is very much based on what you need for your business. Now I'll let Marcus speak to this a little bit because, even though they're a rail service, they provide plenty of services in different ways and forms. But it really depends on what you're looking to get out of it. Zoho One, as I mentioned earlier, is our platform of just about everything that we need to run a business from start to finish. So that will cover what you need in terms of sales, marketing, support, as well as the back end of finances and HR. But everything is also available on its own. So if you want to pick and try a couple things, they're very easy. We've got lots of free trials for everything. But Marcus, do you have any specific advice, or Lori, do you have any specific advice on things that you think would be integral for a services company?
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Lori.
No,
Please.
I was going to say, well, we know that a lot of companies, that they've created virtual services just using something like, Zoho Showtime or Zoho, what's Zoho Present? But because, at this point, a lot of what we've been doing in the physical world, we want to also do in a virtual world. So I think, you can talk tactically or you can talk strategically. Obviously, strategically, you want to be able to, sell virtually. You want to be able to process your back end business stuff virtually. But there's also things that you might just want to use they're very tactical, like Zoho Sign or Showtime or something like that just helps you reach out and do business with customers in a virtual way.
Yeah, and I think, you've got to start with the foundation. Again, for us, it was Zoho CRM. We use that as a sole Zoho application for a year. And it wasn't until we decided to look at a different, service that we were currently using and replace it. And funny enough, by replacing that service, we actually saved money. It paid for Zoho CRM and it paid for Zoho Desk. And really, for a service organization, I think that's what you're going to need. You're going to need, like Lori said, you need a place to sell, but also you need a place to service. So I think if you can at least start off with those two applications, that will take you pretty far. It was just when we started to really look at the data, as you start getting more of that and want to be able to share it in a more, kind of appealing way, a more informative way, that's when you might start looking at an upgrade. But what's nice about Zoho is you can do the a la carte, figure out what you need, and really, grow that with your business. So you don't have to go out and, buy everything today. Start off small, start off with what you need, and then build onto it.
And Summer, if I'm correct, Zoho has like a concierge service, correct?
Yes, and that's a great suggestion, Lori. I didn't even think of that. So if you look up Zoho One Concierge, what that is that's basically a team that will tell you where the best place to start with Zoho is, because we know that it can be a bit overwhelming. So they will talk to you about your business, about what your needs look like, what is most urgent, and they'll suggest a best path to get going.
Yeah, and I think because every business is different, you're going to take a different route. So I think availing with all the solutions Zoho has, plus all of the third-party apps that you integrate with, it's really good to take advantage of getting that advice up front.
Absolutely. That's a great suggestion. I totally agree. We are a bit over time, but we do have just a couple quick questions that I will speak to very quickly. First off is Cynthia's asking if Zoho offers integration possibilities for industrial manufacturing, dealing with representative customers and vendors. Yes, we do. It just depends on what specific service that you're using. I specifically work with a couple customers that are in the manufacturing space and have these integrations set up. So if you have more questions about this, please feel free to respond to the post-event email and I can connect you with them for a bit more info there. And then the last thing that I wanted to project here is Brent was asking if Zoho has a rewards points programs for sales. I assume you mean here referring other customers, and yes, we do. If you Google Zoho refer a friend, you'll see a page there that you can send your own link to people and it provides a credit to your account. So that is an option there as well. And that was just a recently launched program by popular demand. But I don't want to take any more of your all's time. So thank you again so much, Marcus and Lori, for joining us. I think this was a great session and I really enjoyed speaking with both of you. And thank you so much to everyone who joined. This was a great webinar and thank you all for your great questions and discussion. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar afterwards, so keep an eye out for that. Feel free to respond if you have any questions and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.